Jake Morrison had been sitting in the same chair for 3 hours and his back was starting to hurt. The conference room aboard Kepler Prime Station was built for comfort but not for humans. The chairs were too tall and the table was too wide. Everything in this place was designed by aliens for aliens, and humans just had to make do. Across from him sat 12 different alien representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy. Each one had their own demands and each one thought they were being reasonable. Jake had been Earth's top diplomat for 15 years, but these talks were testing even his patience. The Vorthak Prime Minister clicked his crystal shell against the table. His name was something Jake could not pronounce, so he just called him Crystal in his head. Crystal wanted humanity to give up their faster-than-light communication system. He said it was too advanced for such a young species and should be managed by older civilizations. Next to Crystal sat the Trade Federation representative from Zolonia. She looked like a giant blue octopus wearing fancy jewelry. Blue Octopus wanted exclusive mining rights to Mars and 3 of Jupiter's moons. She claimed that humans were mining too aggressively and needed supervision from experienced traders. The worst one was the representative from the hegemony of Trill. He was tall and thin with gray skin and black eyes that never blinked. Gray. Man wanted Earth to tear down all their orbital defense platforms and let alien inspectors live on Earth permanently. He said human weapons were too dangerous and needed constant monitoring. Jake looked down the table at his own team. Lisa Rodriguez sat to his right reviewing files on her tablet. She was a tough woman who had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts before becoming Earth's military advisor. Alan Price sat to his left making notes in a small notebook. He was their alien expert and spoke 7 different alien languages. Better than most aliens did. The lead mediator was from something called the Ascended Collective. Jake had never figured out what they had ascended from, but they acted like they were better than everyone else. The mediator spoke in a voice that sounded like singing, but Jake found it annoying after 3 months of listening to it. Ambassador Morrison, the mediator sang, surely Earth can see the wisdom in these proposals. Your species must learn to work within established galactic systems. Jake had heard this same speech 100 times. Every day the aliens would explain how humans needed to fit into their way of doing things. Every day they would add new demands and call them compromises. Every day Jake would explain that Earth wanted to be partners, not servants. We've been over this, Jake said. Earth is willing to follow galactic law and work with all species. But we won't give up our right to defend ourselves or control our own resources. Crystal clicked louder. Human expansion has been chaotic and dangerous. In 50 years you have established colonies in 30 systems. Other species took centuries to expand so carefully. Maybe that's why it took you so long, Lisa said without looking up from her tablet. The room went quiet. Aliens did not like it when humans pointed out that they might not be doing things the best way possible. Jake had learned that most alien species were very proud of their traditions, even when those traditions did not make much sense. Blue Octopus waved 3 tentacles in what Jake had learned was a gesture of annoyance. Humans do not respect proper procedures. You establish colonies first and ask permission later. You trade with species we have embargoed. You share technology without checking with the proper authorities. Which authorities? Alan asked. The galaxy doesn't have a central government. Each species makes their own rules and expects everyone else to follow them. This was the real problem. The Galactic Council was not really a government. It was more like a club for the oldest and most powerful species. They made rules for everyone else, but those rules mostly benefited the species making them. Younger species like humanity were expected to follow along and be grateful for the privilege. The Kex hierarchy representative had been quiet for most of the morning, but now he spoke up. His voice sounded like grinding metal. Human children show concerning aggressive tendencies. Galactic educational specialists should oversee their development to prevent future problems. The room went completely silent. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. They wanted to control human children. They wanted to take Earth's kids and train them to think like aliens. Lisa's tablet made a small crack as her grip tightened. Alan stopped writing in his notebook. Even the other alien representatives looked uncomfortable. Going after another species' children was crossing a line that most civilized beings respected. Jake stood up slowly. His chair made a scraping sound. Against the metal floor that seemed very loud in the quiet room, he looked around the table at each alien face. Some looked curious. Some looked worried. Gray Man from the hegemony looked pleased, like this had been his idea. "Dr. Price? Captain Rodriguez? Pack up your things. We're leaving," the mediator's song voice went up in pitch. "Ambassador Morrison, please be reasonable. These negotiations are critical for galactic peace and stability." Jake was already putting his files into his briefcase. Lisa and Alan were doing the same thing. Their movements were calm and professional, but Jake could feel the anger radiating from both of them. "For 3 months we've listened to your demands," Jake said. "You want our communication systems, you want our colonies, you want our weapons, you want our children. But you don't want us as equals, you want us as pets." Crystal's shell was flashing. Different colors, which Jake had learned meant excitement or stress. "Surely we can discuss this further. Earth cannot simply abandon these important talks." Jake closed his briefcase with a snap. "We've been discussing it for 3 months. You've made your position clear, and now we're making ours clear." The 3 humans walked toward the door together. Behind them, alien voices rose in confusion and anger. They were not used to anyone just walking away from Galactic Council negotiations. It was not how things were done. Jake paused at the door and turned back to face the room full of aliens. His voice was quiet, but everyone could hear him clearly. "You made a mistake," he said. "You thought because we were willing to talk that we were weak. You thought because we wanted peace that we would accept anything to get it. You were wrong." The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. In the corridor outside, Jake could hear muffled arguing from inside the conference room. Alien voices raised in panic and confusion as they tried to figure out what had just happened. No species had ever walked away from Galactic Council peace talks before. It simply was not done. But humans had a habit of doing things that had never been done before. Jake looked at his companions as they walked toward the docking bay, where their shuttle waited. "Time to go home and tell Earth what we've learned about our new neighbors." Lisa nodded grimly. "They're going to regret this." "Yes," Jake said. "They are." Emma Walsh looked at the red emergency message on her computer screen for the 3rd time. Protocol 7 was something every human working in alien space had been trained for, but nobody had ever expected it to actually happen. The message was simple and clear. All human personnel were to return to Earth territory immediately. Emma was the director of the Titan Research Facility, which was not actually on Titan, but on a small moon orbiting a gas giant in Vortex space. Her team of 37 scientists and engineers had been working there for 4 years, helping the Vortex improve their crystal growing technology. The aliens grew their ships and buildings the way humans grew plants, but they had never been very good at it. "Dr. Walsh," called out Peter Kim from across the lab, "are we really shutting everything down?" Emma nodded and started entering shutdown codes into the main computer. "Pack everything that belongs to Earth. Leave everything else exactly as it is, but make sure nothing we built will work without us here." This was the part of Protocol 7 that Emma had always found interesting during training exercises. Humans were not supposed to sabotage anything or destroy alien property. They were just supposed to take their knowledge and go home. It sounded simple, but Emma was starting to realize how devastating it would be. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds. Ben Carter was commanding the evacuation from New Geneva Station, which was a massive trading hub near the center of alien space. The station processed cargo from 17 different species and managed shipping routes that connected 43 star systems. Humans ran most of the important systems because they were better at logistics than most aliens. "All department heads to the main conference room," Ben announced over the station's communication system. "We have 6 hours to complete shutdown procedures." The alien station manager arrived at the conference room looking confused and worried. His name was Zektar, and he was from a species called the Melody, who looked like giant singing insects. Ben had worked with Zektar for 2 years and actually liked him, but orders were orders. "Commander Carter, what is the meaning of this emergency evacuation notice?" Zektar sang in his musical voice. "Surely this is some kind of mistake." Ben handed him a datapad with the official evacuation order. "No mistake. All human personnel are being recalled to Earth space effective immediately. We'll have the station systems transferred to your control within 6 hours." Zektar's wings began buzzing, which Ben knew meant he was upset. "But Commander, your people run 70% of our operations. How can we manage without your expertise?" "You'll figure it out," Ben said. "You managed before humans arrived." What Zektar did not say, but Ben could see in his large compound eyes, was that the station had been much smaller and less efficient before humans arrived. Human engineers had redesigned the cargo handling systems. Human mathematicians had optimized the shipping routes. Human managers had streamlined operations that had been running the same way for centuries. On Zarian Prime, the situation was even more complicated. Nancy Bell was the chief engineer for 12 fusion reactors that powered most of the Kex industrial complex. The reactors were alien-built, but they were based on human designs and used human-developed safety protocols. Without human maintenance, they would probably keep running for a few months before things started going wrong. "Chief Bell," asked her assistant Marcus Thompson, "should we leave them operating manuals?" Nancy shook her head as she powered down the monitoring systems. "The manuals are in the station database. They always had access to them. The problem is the manuals assume you understand basic fusion physics, and most Kex engineers don't." This was another thing humans had discovered about their alien neighbors. Most species had 1 or 2 things they were very good at, and everything else they did poorly. The Kex were excellent at building strong materials and making weapons, but they had never really mastered energy production. They had been buying power from other species for thousands of years before humans showed them how to build their own reactors. The Vorthak were master crystal growers, but terrible at mathematics. The Zelonians were brilliant traders, but could not build reliable technology. The hegemony of Trill were excellent at organizing large groups, but had no creativity or innovation. Humans were not the best at any one thing, but they were pretty good at everything, and they were excellent at seeing how different things connected to each other. Amy Foster was discovering this as she supervised the evacuation of the medical station. On Haven's Rest, the station served a population of 2 million aliens from 6 different species. Human doctors and nurses had been running the facility for 8 years because they were the only ones who could figure out how to treat patients from multiple species safely. "Dr. Foster," said her head nurse Julie Martinez, "the Saurid government representatives want to speak with you." Amy found 3 tall reptilian aliens waiting in her office. They looked nervous, which was unusual because Saurids were normally very confident and aggressive. Their leader was named Hishtak, and he had been mayor of the largest city for as long as Amy had been on Haven's Rest. "Dr. Foster, we have received word that human medical personnel are leaving Haven's Rest," Hishtak said in his hissing voice. "Surely this cannot be correct." Amy was packing the last of her personal medical equipment into shipping containers. "I'm afraid it is correct. We've been recalled to Earth space. The local medical staff will have to take over operations." "But Dr. Foster, your people treat conditions that our doctors cannot even diagnose. The plague outbreaks that you have prevented will return without human expertise." Amy paused in her packing. She had grown fond of the Saurid people during her time on Haven's Rest. They were proud and sometimes difficult, but they had trusted her with their health and their children. "I'm sorry, Hishtak. The decision has been made at levels far above mine." All across human space, the same conversations were happening. Alien governments that had spent months demanding that humans submit to their authority were suddenly realizing how much they depended on human skills and knowledge. Emergency messages flooded Earth's communication networks as alien leaders tried to understand what was happening. Kate Thompson was Earth's admiral in charge of the 7th Fleet, as she was coordinating the massive evacuation from her flagship Endeavour. Reports were coming in from 67 different star systems as human personnel abandoned their posts and returned home. "Admiral," reported her communications officer Sam Kelly, "we're receiving over 3,000 priority messages. From alien governments. They're demanding that we honor our existing contracts and return our people to their posts." Kate smiled as she read through some of the messages. 3 months ago, these same governments had been demanding that humans be placed under alien supervision. Now they were begging for human expertise to keep their civilizations running. "Send a standard response to all alien governments," Kate ordered. "Earth personnel have been recalled for reassignment. All existing contracts are terminated immediately under the war preparation clauses that the Galactic Council insisted we include in every agreement." Sam looked up from his console with a grin. The war preparation clauses that they said were unnecessary because civilized species don't abandon their obligations. "Those would be the ones," Kate replied. "I guess. We're not as civilized as they thought." 6 months had passed since the humans left, and Minister Zachthel was standing in front of the Vorthek High Council trying to explain why their entire industrial system was failing. His crystal shell was dim with stress patterns that every Vorthek in the room could read. The news he brought was not good. "The manufacturing stations in the Kepler sector are operating at only 40% efficiency," Zachthel reported. "The automated systems that the humans designed for us are experiencing cascading failures. Our best engineers cannot determine how to repair them." Elder Crystal raised herself from her ceremonial growing platform. She was ancient even by Vorthek standards, and her crystal shell was so clear it was almost invisible. "Surely our people can learn to maintain their own equipment. We are not children." Zachthel's shell flickered with embarrassment. "Elder, the human systems are far more complex than anything we have built before. They created networks that span entire star systems and connected them in ways we do not understand. When one part fails, it affects dozens of other systems. This was the problem that every alien government was discovering. Humans did not just build things. They built things that worked together. They saw connections that other species missed, and created systems that were more efficient than anything the aliens had ever imagined. The Zolonian trade Federation was having similar problems, but theirs were even worse, because they depended on interstellar shipping more than any other species. Admiral Squishara floated in her command tank reviewing reports from across their territory. Her tentacles were twisted in knots of frustration as she read each new disaster. "Another convoy lost in hyperspace," reported her navigation officer. "That makes 17 this month. The human-calculated jump routes are failing, and our navigators cannot recalculate them accurately." The problem was that humans had spent decades mapping hyperspace currents and gravitational anomalies that affected faster than light travel. They had created navigation charts that were incredibly detailed and accurate. Without those charts, and the knowledge of how to update them, alien ships were getting lost in the void. Between stars, Squishara had been a ship captain for 30 years before becoming an admiral, and she knew hyperspace. Navigation was one of the most difficult skills in the galaxy. Most species could only calculate simple direct routes between nearby systems. Humans had somehow figured out how to map complex routes that connected distant systems safely and efficiently. "How many ships do we have missing now?" she asked. 43. "Vessels with over 2,000 crew members," her officer replied. "Search and rescue efforts have found 12 ships, but the crews were already dead from life support failures. On Zarian Prime, the Kex hierarchy was facing a different kind of crisis." General Vexmal stood in the ruins of what had been their most advanced manufacturing facility. The fusion reactors were still running, but everything else had stopped working. Machines that had operated perfectly for years were now producing defective parts or nothing at all. "The humans sabotaged our equipment," Vexmal declared to his engineering staff. "There is no other explanation." Chief Engineer Keekter disagreed. "General, we have examined every system thoroughly. Nothing has been damaged or destroyed. The equipment simply requires maintenance procedures that we do not understand. Then learn them," Vexmal ordered. "We have tried, General." The human technical manuals assume knowledge that our engineers do not possess. They reference concepts and procedures that are not in our educational systems. This was becoming a common problem across the galaxy. Human engineers had built systems that were incredibly sophisticated, but they had assumed that whoever maintained them would have human-level technical knowledge. They had not realized that most alien species specialized in narrow areas and lacked the broad, technical understanding that humans took for granted. Rebecca Stone was monitoring all of these failures from Earth's Strategic Command Center. She had been a xenobiologist before becoming an intelligence analyst, and she found the alien responses fascinating from a scientific perspective. Her job was to document the collapse of alien infrastructure and predict where it would lead. The hegemony of Trill lost 3 colonies this week, she reported to President Frank Mitchell during their daily briefing. Their terraforming equipment failed, and they cannot repair the atmospheric processors that our engineers designed. President Mitchell looked tired. The decision to recall all human personnel had been difficult, and he was starting to understand the full consequences. Any casualties? 2 colonies were evacuated in time, but the third lost about 50,000 people before they could establish emergency life support. The Trill government is sending increasingly desperate messages demanding that we provide emergency assistance. What about the Galactic Council? Mitchell asked. Any word from them? They're still demanding that we return to the negotiating table, but now they're also threatening us with economic sanctions if we don't provide humanitarian aid to prevent further disasters. Mitchell almost laughed at the irony. 6 months ago, the Galactic Council had been demanding that humanity submit to their authority. Now, they were threatening sanctions while simultaneously begging for help. On Haven's Rest, the situation was exactly what Dr. Paul Martinez had predicted before he left. Disease outbreaks that he had kept under control for years were spreading through the Saurid population. The local doctors had the medicines he had left behind, but they did not understand how to use them properly. Mayor Hishtak sent daily messages to Earth begging for Dr. Martinez to return. He offered vast sums of money and promised that humans would be given complete autonomy to run the medical facility however they wanted. The messages grew more desperate as the death toll climbed, but Paul was on Luna now working with Earth's defense engineers to design new weapon systems. The galaxy had made it clear that they did not want humans as equals. They had wanted servants who would maintain their technology and solve their problems while accepting inferior status. Amy Foster was reading reports from medical facilities across alien space. Disease outbreaks on 17 worlds, she told her new research team. Infrastructure failures causing environmental disasters on 8 more. The alien governments are blaming us for abandoning our responsibilities. Captain Lisa Rodriguez was now working with Earth's Strategic Defense Council analyzing alien military capabilities. The most interesting development is that they're starting to fight each other, she reported. Without human mediation services and our neutral shipping networks, old conflicts are reigniting. The Kex and Vorthak had fought 3 border skirmishes in the past month. The Zelonian Trade Federation was having disputes with the hegemony of Trill over mining rights that human arbitrators had previously settled peacefully. Dozens of smaller conflicts were erupting as species that had depended on human neutrality to maintain peace discovered what they really thought of their neighbors. Admiral Kate Thompson studied the galactic situation from her command center on Mars. Red zones marking active conflicts were spreading across the star charts like a disease. Areas that had been peaceful for decades were now seeing military buildups and hostile actions. They maintained galactic peace by keeping us busy, she observed to her staff. We were so focused on solving their problems that we didn't notice. They were using us as a buffer between their own conflicts. The galaxy was learning that humans had been much more than just skilled technicians and useful mediators. They had been the glue that held an unstable system together. Now that glue was gone and everything was falling apart. Prime Minister Zeth Kar of the Ascended Collective had not slept in 3 days. His ethereal form was flickering with stress patterns as he prepared to address the emergency session of the Galactic Council. In 300 years of galactic Civilization there had never been a crisis like this one. The Great Chamber on Nexus Station was filled with representatives from 97 different species. Emergency sessions were rare, but this situation demanded immediate action. Industrial output across the galaxy had dropped by 67%. 14 star systems were facing complete societal collapse. Something had to be done about the humans. Fellow beings, Sethkar began in his harmonic voice, we face an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. The humans have committed an act of economic warfare by withdrawing their technical expertise from our worlds. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Species that had been arguing with each other for months were finally united in their anger toward humanity. The humans had abandoned their responsibilities and left chaos in their wake. General Vexmal of the Kex hierarchy stood to address the assembly. His armored form cast long shadows as he spoke. The humans must be compelled to return immediately. Military force is the only language these primitives understand. This brought louder murmurs of approval. The Kex were known for solving problems with violence, and many species were desperate enough to consider their approach. Elder Crystal of the Vorthak spoke next. We offer the humans partnership and they respond with betrayal. They must face consequences for their actions. The debate continued for hours. Species after species stood to condemn humanity and demand action. Some wanted economic sanctions. Others proposed seizing human assets in alien space. The most aggressive voices called for military intervention. Helen Park was monitoring the session from her intelligence post on Titan Station. She had been Earth's top xenobiologist before becoming a spy, and she found the alien responses both predictable and disappointing. Her colleague Chris Murphy was recording everything for analysis. They still don't understand what happened, Helen said, as she watched another alien representative demand human submission. They think this is about economics or politics. What do you mean? Chris asked. Look at how they're debating, Helen pointed to her screens. Each species is presenting their own solution based on their own cultural assumptions. The Kex want to use force because that's how they solve problems. The Vorthak want to impose rules because they believe in rigid hierarchy. None of them are asking why humans walked away in the first place. On the screens, the debate was reaching a crescendo. Speaker after speaker condemned human actions and demanded immediate resolution. The solutions being proposed grew more extreme as the session continued. Representative Squish R of the Zelonian Trade Federation floated in her mobility tank as she addressed the assembly. Humans have violated every principle of galactic commerce. They must be forced to honor their contracts. The humans signed agreements, added Minister Keekter of the Hegemony of Trill. Legal obligations cannot be abandoned simply because they are inconvenient. Finally, the vote was called. The resolution was simple. Operation Restoration would compel human compliance with galactic law through military action. If humans refused to return to their posts voluntarily, they would be forced to do so. The vote was overwhelming. 83 species voted in favor. Only 14 abstained. No one voted against the resolution because no species wanted to be seen as supporting human rebellion. Within hours, mobilization orders went out across the galaxy. Every major species began preparing their military forces for the largest joint operation in galactic history. Ships that had been protecting borders or patrolling trade routes were recalled for this critical mission. Commander Nick Davis was aboard the Deep Space Reconnaissance ship, Watchtower, observing the alien fleet assembly at Staging Point Alpha. What he saw was both impressive and concerning. The combined fleet included over 2,000 vessels from 47 different species. Admiral Thompson, you need to see this, Nick transmitted to Earth. They're bringing everything they have. Every major warship from every major species. Admiral Kate Thompson studied the intelligence reports with her senior staff on Mars. The alien fleet was massive beyond anything Earth had ever faced. Human military forces were advanced, but they were vastly outnumbered. Analysis, Dr. Stone, Admiral Thompson asked. Rebecca Stone had been studying alien military doctrine for months. The fleet composition is interesting, Admiral. Each species has assembled their forces separately. The Vorthek crystal ships are in one formation, the Kex battle cruisers are in another. The Zelonian vessels are scattered throughout. What does that tell us? Asked General Tony Rodriguez. They're not operating as a unified force, Rebecca continued. They're operating as 47 separate fleets that happen to be in the same location. Each species has their own command structure and their own objectives. Admiral Thompson nodded slowly. They're approaching this same way they approached the peace negotiations. Everyone wants to be in charge, but no one wants to actually coordinate with anyone else. There's another problem, Rebecca added. Their ships are designed by committee. Each vessel has to accommodate multiple species with different environmental needs and different tactical preferences. They're impressive to look at, but they're not optimized for combat. President Mitchell's voice came over the secure communication link from Earth. Admiral, what's our status? Kate Thompson looked out at the construction yards of Mars where Earth's new fleet was completing final preparations. 600 ships built to human specifications with human crews trained for human tactics. Mr. President, we've had a year to prepare for exactly this scenario. Our ships are smaller and fewer, but they're designed for one purpose. Every system has been optimized for combat efficiency. Are we ready for this fight? Mitchell asked. Admiral Thompson thought about the past year. Humanity had been forced to choose between submission and independence. They had chosen independence and spent every day since preparing for the consequences. Sir, the aliens made a fundamental error in their calculations. They assumed that because we walked away from their peace talks, we were weak. They assumed that because we wanted to avoid conflict, we would surrender when threatened. And that was wrong, Mitchell stated. Completely wrong, Mr. President. We didn't walk away because we were weak. We walked away because we were strong enough to build something better than what they were offering. The alien fleet was 3 days from Earth's solar system. Every human military installation was prepared for battle. Defense platforms around Earth and Mars were armed and ready. The orbital shipyards had been converted to weapon production facilities, but the most important preparation was not military. For the first time in decades, humanity was completely united. Every human in the solar system understood what was at stake. They were not just fighting for their independence. They were fighting for their right to remain human. Admiral Thompson opened a communication channel to all Earth forces. This is Admiral Thompson to all units. In 72 hours, we will face the largest military force ever assembled in this galaxy. They believe they can force us to return to our chains. She paused and looked out at the blue marble of Earth hanging in space. They're about to learn why that was a mistake. The combined galactic fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, expecting to find a frightened and isolated humanity ready to surrender. Instead, they found something that challenged every assumption they had made about human nature. Admiral Kate Thompson stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel, defiant, watching as her sensors cataloged the incoming alien force. 2,000 ships from 47 different species, arranged in a formation that looked impressive but revealed their fundamental weakness. They had come as conquerors, but they were still thinking like a committee. Admiral, we're receiving surrender? Demands from the alien fleet, reported Commander Sarah Blake from the communications station. Actually, we're receiving 47 different surrender demands. Each species seems to think they're in command of this operation. Kate studied the tactical display showing the alien fleet's approach. The Vorthek crystal ships maintained their rigid geometric formations that looked beautiful but limited their maneuverability. The Kex war vessels spread wide and aggressive displays that interfered with their allies' preferred tight formations. The Zelonian ships clustered around their command vessels, creating obvious targets. Open a general channel, Admiral Thompson. Ordered. Her transmission reached every ship in the alien fleet and every inhabited world within 50 light years. This is Admiral Kate Thompson of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered human territory with hostile intent after we offered you peaceful withdrawal from your space. You demanded we submit to your authority and accept inferior status in your civilization. She paused and looked at the blue marble of Earth visible through the bridge windows. You were wrong about us. The first response came from General Vexmal of the Kex hierarchy, his harsh voice filled with arrogance and certainty. Surrender immediately, humans, or face the combined might of galactic civilization. You cannot stand against the united forces of 47 species. Admiral Thompson nodded to her weapons officer. Colonel Pete Rogers, you may begin the engagement. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The aliens had expected a desperate defense by an outnumbered enemy. Instead, they encountered something they had never seen before: a completely unified force, operating with perfect coordination. Human ships did not rely on overwhelming numbers or impressive displays of firepower. Each vessel had been designed around a simple principle that alien committee-built ships could never match: decisive action. While alien commanders argued over targeting priorities and fleet positioning, human tactical systems had already calculated optimal strike patterns. The first wave of human missiles carved through alien formations like surgical instruments. Ships designed to accommodate multiple species and their different preferences found themselves unable to adapt when their carefully planned formations began to collapse. Captain Don Wright commanded the cruiser Resilient as his squadron engaged the Vorthek crystal ships. Their formations are beautiful but completely inflexible, he reported to Admiral Thompson. When we disrupt their geometric patterns, they can't reorganize quickly enough to respond effectively. The Vorthek ships were masterpieces of crystal engineering, but they had been built for ceremonial purposes as much as military ones. Their crystal hulls could withstand tremendous punishment, but their rigid command structure made them predictable and slow to adapt. Captain Lucy Hyun led her destroyer squadron against the Kex battle line. The Kex were fierce warriors with powerful weapons, but they fought as individuals rather than as a coordinated unit. They're attacking us one ship at a time, she reported. No coordination between vessels. Each captain is trying to prove his personal courage instead of working together. This was the fundamental difference between human and alien military doctrine. Humans had learned to fight as a single organism with many parts. Aliens fought as collections of individuals who happened to be in the same location. Dr. Emma Walsh monitored the battle from Luna Command, documenting what she would later call the difference between cooperation and unity. The alien fleet had 47 different command structures with 47 different objectives. Some species wanted to capture human ships intact. Others wanted to destroy Earth's orbital installations. Still others were focused on minimizing their own casualties. The human fleet had one command structure and one objective: protect Earth and prove that humanity would not be conquered. Within 30 minutes, the alien fleet's coordination completely collapsed. Vorthek commanders blamed the Kex for poor positioning. Solonian captains accused the hegemony forces of failing to provide adequate support. Species that had been allies for centuries began pointing weapons at each other as their carefully planned operation fell apart. Admiral Thompson opened a communication channel to the entire alien fleet. Attention all vessels. You came here believing that superior numbers would guarantee victory. You assumed that because we walked away from your negotiations we were weak. Explosions lit up space around the alien fleet as human ships systematically disabled vessel after vessel. No alien ship was destroyed, but every single one found its weapons offline and its engines crippled. You made the same mistake in battle that you made in diplomacy, Admiral Thompson continued. You brought 47 different agendas to a fight that required one unified purpose. You built ships by committee to face vessels designed by engineers who understood their single mission. The surrender came in waves. First, the smaller species who had joined the fleet reluctantly began transmitting surrender codes. Then the major powers realized their position was hopeless and began ordering their ships to stand down. General Vexmal was among the last to surrender. His flagship was dead in space with its weapons destroyed and its engines offline. "This is impossible," he transmitted to Admiral Thompson. "We outnumbered you 4-1. "Numbers don't win battles," Admiral Thompson replied. "Unity of purpose wins battles." You had 47 different ideas about how to defeat us. We had one idea about how to defend ourselves. Human search and rescue ships were already moving. Among the disabled alien vessels providing medical assistance and emergency supplies. Even in victory, humanity showed the compassion that had made them valuable partners before the aliens tried to make them servants. Admiral Thompson's final transmission was heard across the galaxy as news networks broadcast the battle's conclusion. To all species of the Galactic Council, you came here to force us back into the subordinate role you designed for us. Instead, you have learned what happens when humans stop trying to fit into your universe and start defending our own. The alien fleet limped away from Earth's solar system 3 days later. Their ships were repaired enough to reach home, but their pride would take much longer to heal. More importantly, the balance of power in the galaxy had permanently shifted. Humanity had proven they could walk away from alien civilization. They had proven they could survive without alien approval. Most importantly, they had proven they could defend themselves when threatened. Within weeks, alien governments began sending new diplomatic messages to Earth. These were very different from the demands that had preceded the war. They were requests for partnership and offers of genuine cooperation. Admiral Thompson read the first few messages and smiled. Commander Blake, open a channel to all alien governments. Channel open, Admiral. This is Admiral Kate Thompson of Earth. We are prepared to resume diplomatic relations with any species that wishes to treat humanity as equals. Not subordinates, not servants, equals. She paused and looked out at the stars that humanity would now explore as free beings. The next time you want to negotiate with humans, remember this. We walked away from your peace talks because we could. We survived your economic pressure because we were prepared. We won your war because we fought as one people with one purpose. The age of human subservience was over. The age of human independence had begun.